Twice a month or so, political and pot activist Jodie Emery visits her husband, marijuana crusader Marc Emery, in a U.S. federal prison in Mississippi. Although she says Marc is looking better than he ever has, his cause to legalize marijuana is ongoing, still highly controversial, and he is still in prison. It is my pleasure to welcome Jodie Emery, Director, Cannabis Culture, Headquarters, to Studio 4 to tell us more. Nice to see you again.
Hey, thank you for having me.
What does it feel like for you when you hear her husband, Marc, is still in jail? Her husband, Marc, still incarcerated.
Well, it's a great injustice because people who have never harmed anyone else should never be harmed by prison or the government. And of course, I do miss him terribly, and we have over 2 years left to go. But we both know that our movement is gaining ground, the momentum continues, and we're both very pleased with that, so it's hard to complain.
Were you surprised that, is it John MacKay?
Yeah.
A U.S. attorney, prosecutor, the man who helped put Marc behind bars in Mississippi, now says that the idea of decriminalizing marijuana is a good idea, even though he doesn't regret putting Marc in prison because he did break the law. Illegal to sell seeds.
Yeah. Well, I did meet John MacKay a year ago when I was invited to testify at the Washington State Legislature with him for legalization. So I thanked him then for changing his position. And Marc and I both consider his advocacy now as apology enough. As Marc said, words of an apology don't really mean anything. Actions are really where it's at. And for John MacKay to support a legalization initiative in Washington State to make it legal for adults to buy marijuana, well, that's incredible. And I was pleased to sit alongside John MacKay just recently at the Stop the Violence BC press conference.
Well, and it was interesting for all of us to watch, and it was interesting for me as a journalist to watch Ian Mulgrew, or to read Ian Mulgrew and to read John Ferry, and figure out pretty much they're on your team or on your side, like they believe that it makes sense. And not only they, but mayors and former attorney generals are saying it is time.
Absolutely.
War on drugs not working.
Right, and these people aren't pro-pot. They're not saying marijuana is wonderful, everyone should use it. They're saying prohibition as a policy is creating more harm than good. And we have John MacKay, former attorneys general. You got all these people coming out now and saying we need to change our policy. So Marc and many others have been doing decades of activism to get to this point, and it's great to invite these new allies on side who can really appeal to the mainstream.
And as you know, there's police officers and physicians who also agree. Not that they're saying marijuana is good for your body. They're not saying that. You make a clear point there. They're saying the laws against it are simply not working.
Well, and it's a huge waste of money. We all know the economy is tough right now, but law enforcement spends billions of dollars going after marijuana and going after people who grow it and sell it, and also give billions of dollars to organized crime to let them control the industry. If we took it out of the hands of organized crime, billions of dollars would come into the legitimate economy, and we would cut billions of dollars in wasteful law enforcement spending. It's a win-win for the taxpayers.
Well, it's always been the argument that you take the money from the taxes and you put it into health care and education and all the important areas, and you control it and you put an age limit on it, like we do nicotine, like we do alcohol. As you know, letters to the editor say things, and I know you read some of them, like, he's a dope on dope, he's a curse, he's a pest, meaning Marc. Or they say, free Marc, free the plant, it's time, he's brilliant. How do you sort it out?
Well, we need controversial figures, and we need people who are willing to engage in civil disobedience. It was against the law to smuggle slaves from the south to the north in the United States. It was against the law for a black woman to not give up her seat on the bus, Rosa Parks. Now, these people, I'm not saying Marc is a great saint or anything.
No,
I think he's
or that
a
he's
hero.
Rosa Parks saint. No, I get
but
that.
in the sense of civil disobedience is needed to demonstrate when a law is unjust. And Marc never hurt anybody. He paid taxes on the seed sales. He gave millions of dollars to ballot initiatives, political parties, election campaigns, peaceful civil disobedience to bring about a point that everyone now seems to agree with.
Well, I interviewed him many times on radio in the early days, and he was always on message. He did not waver, and I doubt he wavers today. What's it like for you to visit him in a Mississippi prison?
Well, it's a long journey. It's exhausting, and of course, I do worry about him. If anybody ever loses their loved one to prison, it's constant stress. But we both try and stay positive with a lot of support we continue to get. And again, seeing the momentum of the movement that he's been leading for so long is incredible. It's wonderful to see the U.S. and Canada having a lot of progress. Now, in Canada with Harper, there's a lot of going backwards, of course, mandatory minimums, private for-profit prisons. But I'm very confident that our issue, our fight, will be victorious in the end, because this prohibition policy is destroying lives at a waste of money that we can't afford.
What kind of security do they put you through when you go across the border, number one, into the prison, number two?
Well, the border is also, everyone knows it's pretty tough these days. You're never greeted with a smile. It's always suspicion.
Right.
But in the prison, it's a medium security. I go through airport-style pat-down, remove your shoes, physical body pat-down, get a drug scanner is sometimes used, an ion swabber, and you're not allowed to bring anything in but some change in your ID.
Okay, and no cameras.
No cameras.
No
nothing,
cameras, no
nothing,
phones.
no.
John Ferry went to see him.
Yeah. And that was quite a journey for him, too. He was a bit nervous about it. It is Mississippi, and we all have an image of what the South is
Yes.
like. But there is Southern hospitality there, and the people are kind. And Marc has never been treated unkindly by the guards or by inmates.
Really?
In fact,
So he feels safe there,
Oh,
in
yeah,
a sense.
Absolutely.
Like
he's
trapped,
respected.
but safe.
Yeah, everybody there knows who he is. Even Mississippi Public Broadcasting reads aloud his letters to the editor that get published up here, because they're all blown away that a Canadian can bring so much attention to little old Yazoo City.
Yazoo City. How did you meet him?
How did I meet Marc? Years ago, actually. I used to be anti-drug in high school, and my best friends smoked pot, and I was telling them, "You're killing yourselves, you're crazy." And they introduced me to Cannabis Culture magazine, Pot TV, and it was 2001 with the BC provincial campaign, so the marijuana party had a full slate. And I just got in touch with him online and was one of many people who sought out advice from him and asked questions. I moved to Vancouver in 2004, went to rallies, spent time there at the marijuana party headquarters, and we just fell in love over time. I went to jail in 2004 for passing a joint for a 3-month sentence. And
I remember that.
I was transcribing his prison blogs, and in that time we grew very close. I came to respect him. I consider him a hero. He has saved lives. People name their babies after him, honestly, and there's
Right.
a lot of people who consider him a hero. And
How does he think the battle's really going when you talk to him one-on-one?
he thinks it's great. Honestly, our enthusiasm, especially with all the recent news, we can't even keep up with how many people are saying end prohibition.
Do you think it will become a political football, as they say? For instance, I'll vote for you if you are in favor of decriminalizing drugs, all drugs. Do you have a stand on all drugs, just pot?
I do. Marc and I agree that prohibition is a failed policy no matter what you're dealing with. And if something is harmful, we don't believe marijuana is harmful, but if it is for some people, that's all the more reason to control it and educate people honestly about it instead of using propaganda and allowing the criminal underground to control the distribution and marketing of it.
Well, you know, one of the arguments has always been, well, look at alcohol, the harm it does. Look at nicotine, the harm it does. It's legal, so why this herb?
Well, because we know if we made made alcohol or tobacco illegal, it would be even more dangerous. Just like with Al Capone in the old days of Prohibition, there's a lot of problems that come out of keeping it illegal. And those who advocate maintaining Prohibition are advocating for the continued financing of organized crime, the continuation of grow-ops and teenage drug dealers. Like a lot of these policies that the Prohibitionists claim to be against are created and maintained by Prohibition. If it's dangerous, all the more reason for the government or private industry to control it.
At an
instead.
international level, global, international level, really, U.S., Mexico. If the United States is not in the game, if Mexico's not in the game, do you think Canada would ever go there?
Well, I think that the U.S. has to do it first, and there are a number of states with legalization initiatives. But we know from Mexico's example that even the full military strength of the U.S. Army, the Mexican Army, cannot get rid of the cartels. It's only made them more powerful, 50,000 dead, corruption is rampant. Why would we want to follow that path instead of going towards something more progressive like Portugal, where they decriminalized all drugs, crime rates went down, usage went down? That was 10 years ago. ago they did that. There's a lot of evidence to show prohibition is a failed policy, and politicians who support prohibition are supporting organized crime.
And as you know so well, Judy, people will say, well, if you legalize all drugs, we'll have a mess.
Well,
we'll never get out of it. Everybody will become a drug addict.
Well, I would ask those people, if cocaine was legalized, are you going to go buy a bunch and use it? Of course not. People use it right now every single day. People use drugs. They always have, always will. The question is, how is it going to be distributed, how is it used, and how do we educate people to do it safely? Harm reduction is important whether you're talking about wearing a helmet while you're riding your bike,
Sure,
or whether you're talking about
And the deeper
safety.
question is, why do we need to change our consciousness with alcohol, with nicotine, with pot, with cocaine? What is that about the human? With chocolate? What is it about the human that, and the hunter-gatherers, I mean, certainly, are, smoking this and chewing this leaf, the coca leaf, or whatever. So there's something in the human nature. I don't know. I'm not the scientist.
Historically, it's been around forever. In fact, there's a grave found in China that was like from 4,000 years ago, buried with marijuana that was still intact, because drugs are used by many Aboriginal cultures to connect with the earth. And, there's a lot of people who would argue humans are pretty disconnected from nature right now.
Pretty much, pretty much. So you've been invited, can I say this? To speak at Idea City. That's Moses Neimer's big event. That's an honor.
Oh,
What message will you take?
Well, I get 17 minutes to speak, and I'll talk about Marc, marijuana, and much more, as I always say. But it's about prohibition. I want to discuss, like my op-ed in the National Post, that there are victims of the drug war. There are people who are being harmed by the government when they have never harmed anyone else.
And Marc's status now, how much longer? Chance of him coming back to serve time in Canada? What's up?
July 2014 is his early release date. That's 85% of the 5-year sentence. But he can apply for transfer to come back to Canada next year, and hopefully the U.S. government and Canadian governments will approve it. But with this Harper government, I'm not quite so sure.
Not quite sure. Hello.
Thanks for having me.
Nice to see you. Jodie Emery.